Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kathy G podcast. I'm Kathy Gostaspi, and the mission of my podcast, as I always say, is for us to realize that we are great, that we can be even greater, and more importantly, how can we bring this greatness to the world through a brand? And in this podcast subseries, Who and What's a Healer, it's really about how do you bring the essence of who you are to the world and realize that you have all the power and control within you and it's not outside of you? Healing is not a woo-woo term. It's really about knowing what you need to take care of yourself regardless of your practice area. So I do this podcast for two main reasons. One, I truly care about everyone's well-being and the well-being of humanity deeply. And I want us all to see that we are great and what do we need to do to really be happier. And two, I'm just like you. I'm no different. So I bring these fantastic guests on because I struggle with my feelings of being less than, just like everyone else. And some days are good, some days are ugly. And we're human and we learn from one another. So this time, I've got a fantastic treat for you. I've got Mr. Walt Hampton. And Walt, I don't even know how to introduce you. You're a coach extraordinaire, but you're also a lawyer. So before I ruin the fantastic way you're going to introduce yourself, I'm just going to turn it over to you. But before I do, I will say Walt and I met through the product launch formula community that Jeff Walker runs that I have really enjoyed being a part of. And aside from launching, I think that has been the best part. I've gotten to know some fantastic people who have reached out to me. I had somebody reach out to me the other day and I'm like, who are you? And she's like, I don't know you very well. And I see you a lot around. And so it's just been a blessing to be part of that community. So welcome, Walt. Thanks for making time all the way from across the pond. And you can tell us all about that.
Patty, thank you for having me. I so honor you for this work, what a gift it is to the world, what a gift it is to our colleagues. I think we have one of the greatest professions on the planet. We get to help people in their time of greatest need. We get to solve complicated problems. We get to close complex deals. We get to be part of the shaping of law. And I literally think we are instruments for change in the world, and so I honor you for the work you do for the profession, and thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you, Walt.
Yeah,
You made my whole month. And
well,
for the same reason, then it's a mutual admiration society because you do the same work and I appreciate you
well,
for it.
thank you. So the short story, and we can tease it out further if you want to, was that I came out of Cornell Law School in 1984, and law had been a default choice for me, as it is for many lawyers and law students.
Yes, and
Uh,
I raised my hand and I realized most people are listening, so I should stop doing this after all these years of running the podcast. But yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I was the oldest son of an Irish Catholic mother, and by definition needed to go to the seminary and be a priest, which I did dutifully, and I stayed there for 6 years until it was suggested to me by the rector of the seminary after catching me one too many times in the moonlight with some sweet young thing that perhaps the priesthood wasn't my calling. And then I went to medical school. My dad was a physician, so
What?
door number two was medical school, and I loved medical school, except that I discovered that I didn't really like sick people. So
That's
door number three was law school. My grandfather had been a lawyer. My mom and dad were adamant that you ought to become a professional. And so I went to law school and I loved law school, adored it. But immediately starting practice, Caddy, I realized that it wasn't the right fit for me. I did not like the adversarial nature of it. I found it very, very wearing.
Can
And
I stop you right there, Walt, and flesh out something? I'm
Mhm.
sorry to interrupt you. Why did you like law school then so much? You didn't see that coming. This is a really important point I want to highlight.
Yes, I didn't see it coming. I loved the learning. I loved the entertainment of ideas. I loved the vigorous debate. I loved the ability to think big thoughts and small thoughts and have the space to think those thoughts. I think for many people, law school is the last time you really had a chance to do any kind of deep research and thinking, and have, actually go deep with the law itself. And I also loved, and it's something we've lost culturally. I loved the ability to have animated debates and discussions and disagreements with classmates, and still be able to go out for a beer and pizza at night, be dear friends. That we could agree to disagree and still have that mutual bond of wanting to do good in the world. And so it was a rather harsh wake up call when I was working on my first project, and the managing partner said, "So what's the answer?" I said, "Well, it could be this, or it could be this, or all these ideas." And he said, "No, what's the answer? What are we going to tell the client?" um,
Yeah.
so 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 moving from the realm of ideas, and then my very first mentor in one of my very first days said, "Walt, never ever forget the enemy's not sitting across the table from you. The enemy is sitting next to you," meaning your own
Mm.
client. And what is true is that so many of us. I was a trial lawyer. We end up playing a defensive game. We're always it is a fearful profession. If we get stuff wrong, we get sued, or we have a professional grievance filed against us. And I remember very early on in my practice, I had this relationship with this chiropractor, and I really liked him. We had great fun together, and I was trying a case for him, and we walked in and we were kind of laughing and joking. We had the better side of it. And he looked at me and he said, "Walt, don't screw this up or I'm going to sue you."
Oh,
And and I mean,
that's very adversarial.
he was,
Yeah.
he was, so the practice of law for me was never an easy fit.
Mhm.
And, but
I have
as a,
to tell you, I
hmm,
have to tell you, I agree with you. I had this very same experience. It was very hard every
yes,
day for many reasons. And so, if you're listening to this, I just want to point this out. It's okay to feel that way, and you have choices. And we're going to talk about that through Walt's experience, and you already know my experience. So, keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
that's okay. It's interesting that you say choices. That's yes, from a intellectual perspective, we have choices, and yet I came out in 1984 with $40,000 in student loans, which was an impressive amount of loans in that year. I
Mm.
had a wife, I had two kids, I had the minivan, I had the mortgage, I had all of the things that weigh down a young professional. And a therapist early on in those years called it the golden handcuffs. And those handcuffs, if left unattended, get tighter and tighter over the years because the law, there's that old saying, the law is a jealous mistress. The law also gives us a very nice lifestyle for those of us who are in bigger firms and on partnership tracks. And it's easy to get the toys and the hallmarks of success, and the choice becomes less tenable for us. So while academically we always have choices, the idea, particularly as we go down through our years of practice and we get more and more and more um, narrow and deeper and more experienced, it feels like our choices constrict even further.
And as a lot of my clients say, I'm like, if you're so miserable, you're a 55-year-old white male and you're so miserable practicing, then stop. And he'll
Hmm.
say, I can't because going down that narrow path, now I have three kids in Ivy League school. So those
Hmm.
golden handcuffs, like you said, are super tight because the debt ceiling or the debt period is so high
Yes.
that there's always a choice, right? So what did you do, Walt?
I ended up sucking it up.
Um, that's a choice.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I remember the moment of um, despair. It was in October. I had started in August of 2000, or excuse me, yeah, 2000, no, 1984. Wow, the years go by. So it was 1984, and it was October, and I walked into my office on a Saturday morning, and I had been working 70 and 80-hour weeks, and it was a beautiful Saturday morning, and it was my hermetically sealed office on the 18th floor, which is bad for an outdoors person. And I was watching the sun rise over the Connecticut River, and I just said out loud, "Is this the way it's going to be for the next 30 or 40 years?" And that was such a sense of despair for me in that moment. But also, right around that time, my dad took me to see a photographer. One of my passions is outdoor and adventure photography. And he took me to see a photographer present his work. The photographer's name was Galen Rowell. He was one of the great outdoor adventure photographers at the time. And he had a coffee table book, and my dad purchased the book for me. And there was this phrase that Galen had written. He said, "I have the great privilege of living a life of great joy where there are no boundaries, no firm boundaries between working, playing, and living."
Oh, lovely.
I said, I want that. And that book, for all those years at my firm, sat open to that page on my credenza behind me, and I would come back to that and back to that and back to that. And that became a touchstone for me. And, fast forward now decades, I am blessed to live that life of joy where there's no firm boundaries between working, playing, and living. But there were decades in that space, Caddy, and one of the things that happened was that a casualty of my unhappiness, a casualty of my dissatisfaction, dis-ease was the loss of my marriage. And
Mm,
that unraveled in the late 90s. And that became a whole nother journey for me because in the unraveling of it, I imagined that I was going to be a little bit fancy free. I was going to be untrapped by that. And that I was going to be that divorced dad who had his kids every other weekend and one weekend a summer. And other than that, I was going to have some freedom in my personal life. And what actually ended up happening was that I became the sole custodian of three young kids, three young boys. And I raised three young boys by my own for a dozen years while managing my own law firm. And
wow.
I had hair then. Um, so, so that became a great period of personal development. I learned to be less selfish. I learned to be more giving. I learned to be more empathetic. I learned a whole lot about time and time management. My second book, The Power Principles of Time Mastery, grew out of that period of time. And then toward the end of that, my sisters said to me, "Well, you've been a single dad. That's like all you're doing, and it's time for you to get out and have a relationship." And so I put myself on Match.com, and there's a long, convoluted story to that. A happy story with a happy ending, which is that I met the love of my life, my partner, my business partner, my climbing partner, my running partner, the great author and publisher Ann Shabani. And so it has a very there's a beautiful arc to the story, but there are many dark moments through that path.
And that's just life, right? It really is. We're all on this path. We're all just at
Yes,
different points on this continuum.
of
And
course.
it's going to have an ebb and a flow because I don't look at it as balance. I look at it as harmony. And I really want the listeners to hone in on what he just said, because if you blink, you may miss it. Or if you're doing something else while you're listening to this podcast, as I'm often told, you may miss it, is that he looked at everything from a personal development perspective.
Mhm.
you know there's things that come up in our lives that may not feel ideal or by any standard. Take illness, take loss of someone you're close to, whether it's through marriage or death, or you lose your partnership track potential, whatever. Everyone's issues are legitimate, and the greatness or the smallness of it is not for us to judge.
Hmm.
But there is a perspective we can all have on this, right, Walt? Which is what you're
Of
talking
course.
about. And things come from it. Your book came from that perspective,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is the only way to look at life because that's growth, right?
Yes. But I do
How
want
were
to.
you able to get through it? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted to return to your because I think there's an important piece to tease out here. You use the word that we have a choice, and what I began to realize along this pathway was that when I went to law school, I didn't really learn to be a lawyer. I didn't really learn evidence. God knows, even as a trial lawyer, it took me decades to figure that out. Uh, but we learn a way to see the world. We learn to problem solve. We learn to listen. Learn to advocate. We walked away with a set of tools. And the beautiful thing is that we actually do have the capacity to take that set of tools and do amazing things in the world that aren't pigeonholed to that narrow thing called the practice of law. I went
Absolutely.
down the chute at my Ivy school, 6 weeks in, all of a sudden I own a suit and I'm interviewing for internships. And it was just a foregone conclusion that you'd get a summer clerkship, and then you'd get another summer clerkship, and then you'd get an offer. And then before you know it, some serious time goes by and you're a estate planner or you're a tax lawyer, and you wake up one day and you say, WTF, how did I get here?
Hmm.
But what is true, and I work with a lot of lawyers who want to create something new, and once they grasp the idea that, oh, I can take this tool belt, this toolbox, and I could do something over here with it. And that becomes an exciting moment of creation.
I think that's so valid. When I was a practicing lawyer all those years in DC, and we used to go to say happy hours because that was the big thing after hours in DC. When you would, and there was always some people milling around, diplomats, this, that. It was a fascinating place by so many standards to be a lawyer. But when somebody would ask you, "Hi, who are you?" you never responded with your name. You would
No.
always respond with, "I'm a lawyer." That's what we led with. And it wasn't just me. But years later, when I was going through my crisis, I had to really stop and reflect on that. That
Hmm.
there's identity and there's a role. My role was as a lawyer, but my identity was as Kati Gostaspi, a human being.
Yes.
And that if we would stop and get that early on, then we could make a choice, back
Hmm.
to that word, to be a lawyer and have that role during
Hmm.
certain hours of the day. But like you said, that we could look and say, hey, I have a whole toolbox that's not wrapped around my identity, but I could serve multiple roles based on the gifts that I have and based on the
Yes.
skill set that I've acquired as a lawyer. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. I
Yes.
use my skills as a lawyer daily,
Oh, sure.
from reviewing my own contracts. I mean, I hire plenty of lawyers to do that for me because I fully get that I am not an expert at it if I ever was, but also just the reasoning and just to
Sure.
be able to process data and all that. It's a gift, like you said.
Hmm.
So tell us, how did you get to where you are now? You met Anne, but somewhere in there you shifted careers.
So, for our first Christmas gift, she gave us 2 tickets to Unleash the Power Within, Tony Robbins'
Oh, yes.
event. And I said, "Oh, that's lovely, honey, but that's not me. I don't want to go and jump on chairs and yell and scream and drink the Kool-Aid." She said, "Oh, it would be good for us." I said, I don't know. She dragged me anyway. And so we went. And I did jump on chairs and yell up and scream and drank the Kool-Aid. And on the second day, when Tony made the offer for his 2-year mastery university, I was the one selling Anne that this would be something very cool to do. And Tony has this mantra that gets hardwired with neurolinguistic programming that life will never be the same again. And that was a big inflection point. That moment in time was an inflection point, and life was never the same again because all of a sudden the box was opened and I saw all of the possibilities. And in those years that I was in Mastery University with Ann, I got to know some of the trainers that worked for Tony, and I was invited to apply to be a coach. Now, this was long ago and far away when coaching still wasn't really a thing. And when they said, do you want to be a coach? I thought, well, I already coach for my son's soccer team. What are you talking about? And so the short story is that I applied for Tony's School of Coach Training, and I became one of 70 of his elite level certified business coaches and went to work for Tony as a coach and fell in love with coaching because what I realized was I could take all of these tools and do work that was collaborative, that was loving, that was constructive, that was creative. And I fell in love with coaching in that time. And I got a ton of experience as a coach because our volume that we were using as Tony's coaches was very huge. And then because I'm entrepreneurial by nature, it occurred to me that I ought to start my own coaching business. And so in 2007, we started Summit Success, which is now, 15 years old. It's a global personal and professional development firm. We work with amazing professionals from all around the world, many of whom are lawyers, helping them to create amazing work that gives them great and joy-filled lives.
So your goal is not to take them out of the practice of law. Your goal, I mean, perhaps that happens, but your goal is to create lawyers that really enjoy the practice and their life.
Yeah, I like many of my clients want to stay in the law, but they're just not happy with the way they're doing it. I have one lawyer right now, and she's been in government, in the federal government for a long time, and she's down this little rabbit hole. She doesn't want to stop lawyering, but she needs to figure out how to make it different. I have another client who I've worked with for a long time. His wife hired me quite a while ago, and he was senior in a multinational insurance firm. And he's now creating a boutique wine business and as
Wow.
happy as one could be. And a lawyer that I'm currently working with was a construction litigation lawyer, and he just came to a point in time where he had been in it for 30 years, and it was time to do something else. And he's like me, an endurance athlete and avid cyclist, and he's creating a business helping lawyers reclaim their wellness. And so
Excellent.
so there are lots of different paths because we can take these tools and use them in so many different. I took these tools and used them to become a business coach, and so there are so many different things we can do with these tools that will give us great lives and great joy.
Yeah, and I think that's the freedom around it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we can do so many different things with our lives, but we just have to dare to take that risk
Mm-hmm.
and dare to make the mistake, which by the way never happens because everything is an experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You learn from it. And lately, I've been getting a lot of clients too that are I get a lot of white male in their 50s, in their late 50s,
Yes.
going, you just want a reinvention, or I'm ready for my next phase of my legal career, which I
Yes.
think people are waking up to. But I would have never predicted my clientele, because I'm generally focused on women lawyers, would be
Mm-hmm.
so many male lawyers that are ready to bust out in their 50s. And I think wherever you are on that spectrum, there's real healing for your soul and for your life and for your family when you just say, I'm going to do something different, or I'm going to explore and be open to transformation. So I really think what you and I do has that healing power, because healing isn't about Western or Eastern medicine. It's about what are we doing to create more comfort and joy
Yes.
in our
Amen.
life so we can sleep better at night. So
Amen.
what is that big lesson that you would like my audience to take away?
That wherever you are on the path, it's never too late to refashion, to recreate who you are and what you do and how you do it in the world. And the stories that you tell yourself that I'm too far down the path, or I won't be able to replace this income, or I won't be able to have the same level of significance or identity in the world. All those stories are false. That what you can create beyond where you are right now exceeds your wildest imagination. And if you can even dimly imagine it, I promise you that you can achieve it.
Oh, so well said. So well said. And for those people that are like, well, it's easy for you to say, Walt, you're on the other side of it. What do you say to
Yes, and
that?
I will tell you that, and Ann and I in our personal and professional development business plant a flag on this. The interweb is full of bullshit. If you do this one thing or that one thing, you're going to be an overnight success. Ann and I have built 5 successful businesses from scratch, and every single one of them has taken time and a dirty 4-letter word called work. And if you're willing to be a creator, if you're willing to imagine, if you're willing to become childlike again, if you're willing to become a beginner again, you can create amazing things regardless of where you are. But it's not going to be a straight path. It's not going to be a straight path. You need wise guides. You need patience. You need good people around you to support you. But if you walk the path, the promised land is extraordinary.
Ah, so well said. Because I think so many of us lawyers fall into the trap of the ego that I know this and I'm really smart and I put a lot of effort into it. So I'm going to see it to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't want is the end to be the end of your health, the end of
Mm-hmm.
your marriage. I mean, it all happens and it all turns out well. Everything, if you look at it that way, works. But it would be so much more enjoyable to be on that path from a place of not resistance, of
Mm-hmm.
saying, let's look at options and opportunities
Mm-hmm.
and let's not be so wedded to one way of doing things. Because that's how I was. I was a
Yes.
securities lawyer. I was like, I'm an immigrant. I worked hard for this. This makes me look good. I lived in the looked good world, Walt. I
Mm-hmm.
really did. Like, if I'm not a lawyer, what will they think of me? And
Of
my mother
course.
said that to me. God rest her soul. She said, I don't know what to call you now. I used to tell all my friends, my daughter's a lawyer. Now, what the hell are you? And I was like, I remember just looking at her going, that's a really good question. But I was so ashamed, right? Because I was in that flux point. But I just knew I couldn't go back, Walt.
My mother
Just
died. My mother died with the same question on her lips, the very same question on her lips.
Isn't that so interesting? And
Yeah.
so we cannot live into our parents' lives. We cannot live into other
No.
people's expectations of
Yes.
us. We all know this, but when we
Yes.
talk about I'm hoping this gives permission for other lawyers who are somewhere along this path on this cusp
Mm-hmm.
of breakthrough to say, oh, maybe I can
Mm-hmm.
look at it this way because Kathy and Walt did.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes. Yeah.
beautiful, Walt. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
here's my second final question to
Mm-hmm.
you. None of us are perfect. You're dealing with your own challenges. You must be because you're on the growth path somewhere. So what's a challenge on your plate? And let's brainstorm about it.
So it's an interesting parallel challenge, like a parallel universe, like a Star Trek thing. As a
I love
young
Star.
young lawyer, I was putting in 70 and 80-hour weeks, doing work that didn't light me up, that was wearing me down, and I had no choice but to do that. And the challenge now is that I so love the work I do that I don't want to put it down. So we're recording this on a Friday afternoon. It's 5 p.m. in West County Cork, Ireland, where I have the great fortune and privilege of living. And unlike in my lawyering days, where I would be nauseous on a Sunday night, thinking about the week ahead, I kind of like sad that the week is over. I mean, I work with the most amazing people, and I love it. the pandemic, the last 20 months, has exacerbated the challenges because the lines of our lives have become blurred. And
Yes.
for me, the challenges, I self-medicated with the challenges in two ways. One is Ann and I are distance runners, so we ran probably 5,000 or 8,000 miles more than we would have during the last 20 months, which
Oh
is great,
my.
great for our wellness. But the other thing is that, when there's nothing else to do, particularly during the lockdown time, is that we would gravitate to work,
Work. I
which
knew
is
you were going to say that.
which we love, but it has, what we've realized that it's created unidimensionality again. Not um, it's not been ideal for life. You said there's no work-life balance. I say that too. I say there's just life, and it hasn't been good for the richness of life. And so that's been the challenge. And So we've been working on that.
Fantastic. First of all, I give you full props for having self-awareness around it. From
Yes,
coach to coach, that's the first step, right?
of course.
99% of the issue is being self-aware that, hey, something is not sitting well with me,
Yes.
or I'm always scanning the panoply of my day and my life to see where I am optimal and where I'm getting the greatest joy and
Hmm.
satisfaction. By the way, that's healing, frankly.
Hmm.
And this is a little lopsided. So,
Yes.
what now that I know it with self awareness, what do I choose as a new perspective on it? And then how do I take action on that?
Yes.
So, what
Yes.
are you and Ann doing as a result of that?
Oh, yesterday we booked 3 weeks in Nepal to climb a mountain that's been on our list.
Fantastic. I love it. That's a good example. What would you do? What are you doing on a smaller scale that some lawyer at home going, I don't have it to go to Nepal for 3 weeks like Walt, but I can do X about
Yes.
my overworking, my workaholism. And this is true for all of us. It's a brilliant challenge
Yes.
that you raise because we're all and I will give you what I do about it. But what's another tip you have for someone who's not going to Nepal for 3 weeks? I can't wait to see
So
those
uh,
pictures.
so
By the way,
so so self care. Self care is
yes,
key. Self-care is the least selfish thing you can do. And when I'm teaching wellness to lawyers, I have we teach the health triad, EEE. It's a triangle, E cubed, and it's eating, exercise, and emotional well-being. And the emotional well-being piece is at the base of that triangle. And if we can pay attention to those three pieces, the triangle, with good practices, that will get us a long way down the path. But it really begins by carving out time, as if you might carve out time to prepare for a deposition, to carve out time. And I suggest the first hours of the day, for lawyers. I had to reclaim those hours as a single parent, because it was the only quiet, insane time I had. And so I would say begin by carving out half an hour even, or an hour even, in the quiet of the morning for yourself, and spend some time meditating and journaling and reflecting and just being still.
I love that. And so it's really about breaking up the habit, changing the habit. We're all used to working more these days, and it's changing
Yes.
the habit. And actually, you've got to listen for support triggers. Like
Hmm.
I was just telling Walt before this podcast started, I heard him and Dr. Tom Garcia, another one of our colleagues, on a podcast. Oh, no, it wasn't a podcast. It was a webinar you guys did. And I was supposed to be traveling and I wasn't. This is a couple of weeks ago, last month maybe. And it hit a home with me when he said that. Walt said, get up earlier. And I remember putting into the chat, I need to get my sleep. And then one of you wrote back, go to bed earlier. I mean, it's so obvious, but I used to do that. And then I fell off the wagon
Hmm.
because of the pandemic. Somehow I became lazy, but I was overworking to compensate for being lazy and wanting to sleep
Hmm.
more. I don't know. None of it made sense. But I heard that and I put that into effect. So thank you
You're
for
welcome.
that. A
Yes.
bit of like common sense, but like you just need to hear it. But that's the point. Breaking that habit is extremely important.
Hmm.
The other tip
Yes.
I have is rituals, like
Hmm.
literally at 5 o'clock. Well, now I go back to the office, but some days like today I'm still at home. But like I used to walk out the front door during the pandemic at 5 o'clock, and I used to walk back in like
Hmm.
I was home for the day.
Yes.
Or light a candle, make it
Yes.
so that it's not a sterile atmosphere where you're
Yes.
not at work. Or when you have a glass of wine in front of you, I don't advocate alcohol because I think too many of us turned to that during the
Hmm.
pandemic for numbing, but something that is not a day, quote unquote, business setting to break up that visually and break you out of that habit of
Yes.
just sitting there. Because so many people told me that. They're like, I look up, it's 9 p.m. And if you don't have children or a dog or any obligation, you just
Yeah.
work.
No
All you need
boundaries.
is food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Anything else you want to tell us? Any last bit of wisdom you want to leave us with? I could talk to you probably forever, but I know it's after 5 o'clock and Anne's probably waiting for some fantastic adventure with you over a glass of something or other.
Yeah. I think the wisdom I would hope to share with your listeners and viewers would be this: that we don't have a whole lot of time to get this right. The last 18 months have shown us anything. It's shown us how brief it all is, how fragile it all is. And in the end, none of us is going to care whether we have billed more clients or seen more networking events or closed more deals or had more frequent flyer miles or networked more, or tweeted more, or updated our Facebook status more frequently. What will matter will be the lives that we have touched, the lives that we have healed, the experiences that we have had, the love that we have shared. What will matter will be that we have not paid attention so much to the urgent, but what's truly important. What will matter is that we have lived without regret. And that's what I so most want for those who are listening to us today.
Absolutely. Well said. I'm not going to say anything over that because I'd like to end on that beautiful point. Walt, if people want to find you, how can they access you online, please?
Walt at walthampton.com, or just
Oh, wow.
Walt
You're giving
Hampton,
us your email address.
walthampton.com. I made that up myself.
Great job. But there's also Summit Success. Is that
Yes,
correct?
our overarching business site is summit-success.com, summit-success.com.
And I will put all that in the show
Good.
notes so they can find you there. Walt Hampton, thank you so much for being my guest. It's been
Thank you for
truly an
having me.
enlightening experience. I hope you all walked away with at least 1 to 3 nuggets you can implement right away in your life because you have a choice and we don't want to live with regrets.
Amen.
So until next time, Kati G out, and thank you all.